Boise's street protests against the war and heightened interest in the presidential election have done a great deal to dispel the notion that young people today are apathetic. Instead, these news events have confirmed what UC San Diego professor Jorge Mariscal and others have been saying for years, that young people do care about the world around them and often just need a catalyst to agitate for social change. Mariscal has brought many such catalysts to the campus of UCSD, and the latest was Project YANO.
It stands for Project on Youth and Non-Military Opportunities. And what it is a group of activists and veterans who go into local high schools and career fairs and simply talk to young high school students about what the military is really like. Many times recruiters forget to give information or maybe distort information. So our goal and the goal of Project YANO is really to make sure that everyone has the proper information before they make such an important decision as enlisting in the military.
It's called counter-recruitment, something that Mariscal and others at Project YANO believe is necessary to balance the military's all-positive message.
Welcome to GoArmy.com. You've taken the first step to becoming stronger than you ever imagined you could be. Here you'll discover adventure, the chance to give something back to your country, and the kind of training that truly prepares you for the future. Now, hear what it's like to be a soldier from real soldiers, and explore over 150 careers. There's Strong, and then there's Army Strong. Click on any video to begin.
The most vulnerable population in terms of military recruitment are what we would call working class people or lower middle class youth from all ethnic groups. It doesn't really matter. The largest groups serving right now in Iraq are lower middle class whites. And most of those are from rural areas. So it really has to do with the range of opportunities available to young people. And in economically depressed areas, there just aren't very many opportunities. And it's very difficult for those youth to attend college. Even a community college would be expensive for many of them. So the Pentagon's pitch for "we'll give you money to study" is very powerful for those folks, or even "we'll give you job skills that you may not have." Well, I think for any young population that's being targeted by the Pentagon, the fear is that although they're very intelligent young people, they don't have experience dealing with high-powered salespeople, and that's what a recruiter is. And so you get this multi-million-dollar campaign in the media, and then you get very well-trained recruiters selling something, an 8-year commitment, because it's always 8 years, military contracts are always for 8 years, to 17 and 18-year-olds who again are very intelligent but simply don't have the life experience to deal with a high-powered salesperson, don't know that they should be asking about the fine print, what if this doesn't happen, will I still get this? So a lot of promises are made and a lot of promises are never realized.
Mariscal, who as a young man served in Vietnam, is often asked by YANO to talk with teenagers, or in this case their parents, at a conference for minority high school students hosted by MECHA, the Chicano student group at UCSD.
Me llamo Jorge Mariscal, soy profesor de estudios chicanos latinos aquí en UCSD. One of the situations that we have in public schools is the heavy presence of military recruiters, especially where there are a lot of students of color. The military is very interested in our young people. They know that they don't have a lot of opportunities, and so they tend to focus on those schools. We have a group called Project YANO, which is a group of veterans like myself that goes out into the schools and gives the students the proper information. If students want to enlist, that's their decision together with their family. But sometimes the recruiters don't tell the truth, and sometimes they tell half-truths. So our goal is to make sure that before making such a serious decision, the young people have all the necessary information. For Latino recruiting, what they've done very openly, they talk about it in their literature, is to target parents now. In their literature, they talk about the fact that the Hispanic mother is the biggest obstacle for them in terms of recruitment, because she just simply doesn't want her children to be in danger. So you'll see many of the print and TV ads now in Spanish with parents in it.
He points to ads like this one, which says, "You taught him never to give up. We do the same." Or this one, "You have faith he will make it to the top. We'll show him how." UCSD student Sandra Gutierrez considered enlisting at one point.
But I think the main reason for why I wanted to go into the military is because of all the recruiters that came into the high school I went to. It's a majority Latino, so the recruiters were in our classes every other week, telling us about the 20-year retirement plan and the money for college and all that stuff. So it sounded really good. But I got to talk to some people, and I got to talk to, friends, and they were the ones that turned me around. And I realized that that was probably not the best path for myself.
Instead, Sandra enrolled at UC San Diego, joined MECHA, and helped organize this day-long conference to expose Latino families to college life. MECHA asked Project YANO to participate.
This event here today brings a lot of students to this campus who are generally underrepresented in colleges, and they are prime targets of military recruiters. So this type of event gives us an opportunity to reach the students that we think need to hear our message most. And recruiters are very smart about who they try to recruit. They realize that young people who have more limited options, either financial, because of their financial status, or because they come from a community where going to college might not be a tradition, and they realize that those students can be talked into joining the military much more easily than students who are coming from other communities where they might have more options available.
I think a lot of the whole military, you'll get the answers to whatever you ask, and as a student or as a person in high school, you don't really question a lot of the things, so anything they say sounds good, and you don't really question what it takes to become an officer, or what rank can I really reach, even if my parents are not residents or citizens. So I don't think they lie or they give bad information. I just don't think they give enough information for the students to really know what it really is. So I don't think they lie about it. I just think that they don't provide the whole picture, which is where things go bad.
We do not tell them they should or shouldn't do anything in particular. We don't tell them not to enlist. We basically say, look, there's this other side of it that you must be aware of if you're going to make an educated decision.
Project YANO volunteers distribute information about college opportunities and other non-military career options to schools, job fairs, and public events like this one in City Heights. Among the most active in YANO is Michelle Gutierrez, a UCSD graduate student in ethnic studies, speaking here to the high school students invited by MECHA.
One thing that you have to remember is that military recruiters are trying to make a sale, okay? Military recruiters have a certain percentage of people that they have to get every single month, or else they face consequences, okay? They don't get vacations. A lot of things can happen to them. So one of the primary things that they're focused on is getting people to sign up, okay? And so when you talk to them, right, you go and you talk to them, they seem like they're a counselor, they care about you, they care about your future. But remember, in the back of their mind, they're thinking about the fact that they need to get those sales, right? They need to get people.
Well, one of the things that I've found, and this has been when I was an undergraduate and throughout graduate school, is that one of the things that really motivates my research and motivates me as a graduate student is being involved in the community. We essentially have the same access to high schools as recruiters do. And so we go in and we usually bring a veteran, someone who's had some experience with the military, and we just debunk a lot of the things that students have learned about the military. A lot of times recruiters, they give them half of the story because they're trying the best that they can to get someone to enlist in the military. And so we go back and well, what did they tell you? And then we actually break those things down a little bit, like the college financial aid. Very few people get that money. You pay into it, very few people get that back. And so that's something they don't really know. They think they go in, it's easy money. Sometimes they hear they'll be in the military for 1 year, 2 years, but really their contract is for 8 years. And a lot of people get, right now a lot of reservists are being called back. And so these are the things that they don't know. They think it's easy, I'm gonna go in, I'm gonna be tough, and I'm gonna get all these benefits and go on with my life. But tragically that, isn't usually the case.
On this day, Michelle introduced these students to Fernando Suarez, who tells the story of his son Jesus. He was first approached by a military recruiter at 13, enlisted in the Marines at 17, and died at 20 in Iraq. Mr. Suarez said his son was attracted to the financial perks offered by the Marine Corps, but of course did not live long enough to enjoy them. Project YANO's Rick Jonkow came to UCSD again to talk about the history of military recruitment to Professor Pat Washington's undergraduate class on ethnic diversity.
Years ago, after World War II and leading right up to the mid-1970s, the U.S. military relied very heavily on conscription to fill its manpower quotas. And one thing that happened with that draft is that it had a disproportionate impact on working class and low-income communities. It had a disproportionate impact because affluence, political connections, and level of education all affected who got drafted. And if you were not affluent, if you did not have a high education, if you didn't have political connections, you had a much greater chance of being drafted and of having a more dangerous role in the military as well. These facts were brought to the attention of many of us when, in the 1960s, civil rights organizers began to connect that particular issue with opposition to the Vietnam War. And so people like myself, I was a student at that time, we began to develop an analysis that went beyond simply looking at how war impacted the individual to looking at how the economics of war impacted whole classes of people. And that is a very important part of the background for those of us who formed Project YANO in 1984. After the draft ended, the military had to shift to relying more on mass marketing and aggressive recruiting in order to fill its personnel quotas. And what we saw happening then was an evolution into an economic form of conscription, where low-income people, youth of color in particular, were being targeted by recruiters because of the relatively fewer career and educational options that they had to choose from. And some organizations here in San Diego that had their roots in the 1960s movements were conscious of this and decided that they needed to do something about it. They had to develop some kind of a plan of action to address this problem. The groups that participated in the discussion of this were ones that had been organizing around a whole variety of causes that included civil rights, economic justice, and nuclear disarmament. And their feeling was that these and many other issues intersected when it came to the way that low-income communities and youth of color were being disproportionately impacted by war and militarism. And so the vehicle that they created to address that overlap in issues was Project YANO. Since we were formed in 1984, we've developed and pursued a whole range of goals, and I'm going to just give you some of the main ones. One has been to compile information on non-military training programs and college financial aid, and then present that to young people as alternatives to military enlistment. Another has been to present students in secondary schools and the community with a critical alternative view on military enlistment itself, so that they would have a balance against what recruiters were telling them. And we've relied on military veterans primarily to present that critical alternative view. One of our other goals has been to stimulate youth involvement in social change activism. And we do that by encouraging young people to think critically about what's going on in their communities and in the world. We've also promoted the idea of socially responsible careers. Another goal that we've pursued is to educate policymakers on the impact of militarism in the educational system. And to give you an example of how we're doing that, we're currently involved with a very large and growing group of parents, students, and educators who are trying to convince the San Diego School Board to have a hearing on their concerns regarding weapons training in local schools, and also the tracking of students into military science courses. And these problems are impacting primarily youth of color, and we feel like and the parents and others who are involved in this feel like, for example, the weapons training, the shooting ranges that are in some of the local high schools are undermining general ongoing efforts to combat violence in community. And so there's a real emotional response to this when they find out that there are in fact shooting ranges in some of their schools. Let me talk about a couple of schools to illustrate what I mean here. At Mission Bay High School, about 50% of the students are Latino, many of whom speak Spanish in their homes. This year, about 90 of those students submitted a request to have a Spanish advanced placement course at their school, which could help them qualify for college. They were turned down. At the same time, a Marine Corps Junior ROTC program was introduced. It took over 3 classrooms and forced teachers to have to share space. At Lincoln High School, where a majority of the students are African American, but there's also a large percentage of Latinos that come in second at that school. And what we learned at the beginning of this school year was that junior ROTC representatives went to the physical education classes to recruit students. And as a result of that, we know 6 students dropped their AVID classes in order to take junior ROTC. I don't know how many of you are aware of what AVID is, but it's a specifically designed program to help underrepresented students get into college. Whereas junior ROTC credits and grades are not even recognized by colleges and universities. They count for 0. So these students like these 6 at Lincoln could very well be hurting their chances of getting into a college as a result of having that program at their school.
I actually participated in the Naval Junior Reserve Officer Training Corps at my high school. I dropped it because I thought the curriculum was completely ridiculous in that it didn't teach you about the politics and like the current events of the time involving the military actions. I guess my question is, do you believe that the program should be completely dropped, or do you think that the curriculum should be fundamentally changed, or like what would be your solution to addressing the JROTC problem?
Our position has been that schools are for education, and that there are some positive aspects to junior ROTC, and we've acknowledged that, especially I think the feeling of self-confidence that it can instill in young people, the camaraderie can be a positive, self-discipline is good, but our view is that these are things that can be taught other ways as well, and that it's more important for schools to identify the programs that are created for those purposes that aren't at the same time serving as a recruiting mechanism for the military, that aren't serving to militarize values and behavior. That's not the function of our schools, and so they shouldn't be involved in it. So we would actually say that junior ROTC does not belong in the schools. It's a military training program. They fold into it some other aspects to try to rationalize having it there, and some of their reasons seem to make sense, but that the real reason for it is recruiting. And so it just shouldn't be there.
My question is more, I guess, geared towards the curricula of the junior ROTC program. Is it more like a class that students take, like Spanish, math, art, or is it more like a program that you start from 1 year and continue throughout your high school years?
You can take it once and drop out, but it really is a program they try to encourage people to enroll in and stay in for 3 or 4 years. The way it works is that you can use it to get PE credits. Most schools allow it to count towards physical education. So people are taking it for that. The other thing is that to entice people to go into the military, they've offered students who are in at least 3 years the right to enlist at instead of the very beginning E1 enlistment grade 1, they can enlist at the E2 or E3 level, which means you get, I don't know, $50 or $60 a week more on your paycheck.
Okay, well, I'm actually familiar with your organization. I'm a really big fan of it. And I actually wrote my term paper for this class on the role of JROTC and No Child Left Behind in militarization of schools and funneling students of color into military programs. And I was wondering, does your organization do anything on the political level addressing No Child Left Behind's militarization in schools? Are you associated with any kind of opt-out groups?
We do try to educate people about the right that they have under federal law to ask that this is high school students primarily, that their name, address, and phone number not be released to the military. We have a form, an opt-out form that we distribute. There's no particular requirement for a form or format for making that request, but we do have a form that we circulate.
Can you talk a little bit more about what you do for the students that aren't college bound, that look to the military as a way of learning a trade and providing an income for themselves? Because it seems like with a very declining employment rate, how do you combat that with students who feel like they have no other options?
That is a serious problem, and it's one that we have not overlooked. What we do is we compile, we do the research and compile information on the local and regional job training programs, and also about, in some cases there's financial aid for occupational training, and so we put that into basically a directory that we compile, and we distribute that. But the reality is that having just a high school diploma or a GED is just not enough anymore. And so the other thing that we try to do is not assume that those individuals don't have the capacity to go to college, even if it's a community college. What we want them to do is seriously consider that possibility. So while we'll give them these other options, at the same time we're trying to get them to think seriously about, well, could you take a community college course? Maybe that's the way to go.
I'm a 4-year veteran of the Navy, and I was very fortunate. My father spent his career in the Navy, and when I joined the Navy, I had a better expectation of what Navy life would actually going to be like. And looking back, I value my time in the Navy, and I do feel that it is a good alternative for people coming out of high school. It's one of many alternatives they could choose from. I guess my main question is the focus with this project more to deter recruiting on campuses, or to give a more balanced view for that students have other opportunities other than going into the military. And then one of the reasons why I asked that is because one problem I did see in the military was a lot of my fellow sailors with me in the Navy that were in their first term had expectations that didn't meet what was the reality, the situation. And it just seemed like, a lot of times they just, had this expectation of the way things were going to be, and they got in there. And that's why I believe that's one of the main reasons why the military has trouble retaining people. Because, you see the commercials, it's all hyped up, and when you get there, it's not like that at all.
We can't and don't tell young people, students, what to think. Instead, what we do is we simply say, look, there are other ways of looking at issues. It's important for you to ask a lot of questions and look for more information, and then make up your own minds. But the important thing is that you ask those questions, and this results in more critical thinking. And I would say that ultimately, that's probably the most important effect that our organization can have to stimulate that kind of thought process. So with that,
And that, the focus on critical thinking, is why Jorge Mariscal brought Project YANO into the classrooms of UCSD.
The goal of any university education, especially liberal arts education, is to see the multiple sources of information in your culture at any particular moment and have the faculty which allows you to make an informed decision, analyze your world, and if you're so inclined, to try to go out into the world and change it.